Wristblade modifications part 3. Part 3 is all about disassembly and studying. I have separated the wristblade into its layers, like so. So you'll have to do the same. Now this is a perfect example of one of these tutorial videos that may not apply to your particular project. It all just depends on the design of the wristblade that you previously bought. So yours may be different to this one, but the principle is still the same. Pull it apart, study it, understand how it works. Now after disassembling this one, I've realized that it's got a lot of differences between this one and the last one. For example, this here, the retraction bar, is actually separate to the sliding plate, so I guess now they're two different things. Oh, by the way, I am making up my own names for these things, so you know, if you know a better term, then feel free to use it. But anyways, so this here is what I call the slide plate. In my other one, it's quite different, but the fundamental purpose is the same. So basically, that little piece that sits inside that, which is how it's able to retract it. That sits in there, and this here is a very, hang on, trying to see. This little piece here is a huge convenience and has taken a modification away from the process that I had to do to my last one. This is where the string attaches, right in the middle of it, which is exactly where you want it. You don't want it to be pulling from like over here. You want it to be pulling from sort of midway. So that's good. One thing I've noticed about this one is that spring. It is very thin, and they have left a lot of room, which is excellent. That is a very good sign, which means we can replace the spring with something a bit bigger. Probably not quite that big, but anyway, I'll find a decent sized spring, because my last one I had 4 springs, well, places where I could put 4 springs, and this one's only got 1, so at least I can put a nice big one in it. So in regards to the function of the slide plate, you've got these 2 little pieces here that sit in the grooves on either side, and they have, that's what the tension comes from, so there. Of course, the sliding plate isn't enough on its own, so it needs a guide, which is what this layer is. That sits there, separating the retraction bar from the slide plate, and this sits inside this little groove. Although it's a bit fiddly, but no. Cool. So you notice how these 2 little bits on the inside that I showed you before, they have these little notches there that stick just above that layer. Once we get this there, which acts as a guide for it, spacer I guess, those notches will be what triggers, launches the blade. So you can see, yeah. So you see that notch sits in behind that groove on the back of the blade, and then when it's all the way out this way, the notch sits inside it there, which means we are completely relying on that tiny little piece of metal at the back there. That's what it hooks onto. Now you may have noticed in my other videos with my other wrist blade how I've got one of these down the center of my blade too. Now I only did that on that one just to take some weight out of the blade, but with this one it's different. That is important, like it has to be there, which means if you've got one like this and that's what it's hooking onto to launch and retract the blade, then this groove when you're doing your blade needs to be perfect. But we'll get to that when it comes time for the blade. Next we have these two pieces here. You'll notice that this one is plastic and this one is metal like the rest of it. At first I thought they just maybe used too much steel or something like that, and to save on cost just made a replacement layer out of plastic, but no, it turns out it's actually plastic for a reason. I'll get to that in a second. So that's those two layers create the blade chamber. That's where the blade just sits inside. Now, next, this is something I'm not too sure how I feel about this just yet, but these tiny little pieces here are essential. Let's get a closer look here. If you notice just down there, hang on, just there's that little hole, alright? And in every single design of wrist blade, there's always got to be something that is able to spring like that on both sides. That's what puts the spring behind these little catches. Apparently this is what suffices as a catch in this design, so that will sit inside that little groove like so. This is so difficult to do by holding the camera as well, but now I prefer the design of my other one a bit better because it was designed in a way where I could sit the catch in there and it would just hold its place, but the catch needs to sit on the outside of the little spring piece here. So to show you just like that, if you can see, that's better. Alright, see how it sits on the outside so that when, see, it's not going to stay there because it's just sitting in there loosely. So if you've got one like this, I'd recommend anytime working on it, just pull these out and just sit them in there like that so that it will hold its place while you're working on it. Put that one in the other side. And then when it's time to put it back together, just lift it out and sit it there. So the idea is that when that little piece there is, that puts the tension on it so that it can pivot, but it can't pivot without the other layer on top because that's got the other hole that holds the top in. So I can't exactly show you how it works, but anyways, so we put this back on top, brings it all back together. It looks like I need to sort of get in there and move those catches into alignment. And this is the part when I always realise, oh shit, I forgot to do something. In this case, it's put the blade string back in. So anyway, we're not ready for function yet, so it doesn't matter. So that's part 3. It's just an explanation of the internal mechanics and how it all works. It may not apply to yours, like I said. So if yours is different and you're having trouble like working it out or figuring out how it works and anything like that, then just put in the comments. I'll see what I can do to help. But until then, I'll see you for part 4.